Hello and welcome to Radio Free Urbanism, a podcast about urbanism and stuff. I am one of your co-hosts today. We've got a full slate of four of us today. I'm Alex Williams, and joining me is Nick Laporte.
Hello and welcome back, everybody.
And Ethan Myers.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back.
And we also have Kristin with us from Walking Detroit. I don't know your last name, but welcome.
Hi, I'm Kristin Fehrman. Nice to be here.
Fantastic. Yeah, we're super excited to have you. We've had this on the books for a little while, so we've been looking forward to it. A great way to start May, though I do have snow on the ground still outside. I want to hear, though, before we get into things, who are you? What is Walking Detroit? Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. So I live in Michigan. I'm a Michigan native. But after college, I moved out to San Francisco and really fell in love with the bus system, transit, and walkability. So over the years, I've lived in several big cities, including New York and Boston. And 10 years ago, when I moved to New York City, I sold my car, and I have not driven a car since. Not even once. So a couple of years ago, after COVID kind of settled, I thought, what's next? I was living in my hometown, which is Traverse City, Michigan. And I thought, you know what would be cool is to move to the Motor City and show my lifestyle of what I've been doing the past 8 years. You know, my love for buses, transit, walkability, and just the benefits of walking. So after this guy told me, you can't move to Detroit without a car, I thought, okay, so I'm going to start this Instagram page called Walking Detroit to show, you know, what I see, how I get around, and kind of what a 15-minute city looks like through my eyes in my neighborhood of Midtown Detroit. So over the past year and a half, I've been documenting it on my blog. I have a TikTok. But mostly I post on Instagram and will post stories on my Instagram pretty much live, like where I am, how I'm getting around, and the things I notice while I'm walking through Detroit.
That is super cool. You said that, and we're going to ask you more questions, but I just got to get this one in first and early. You said you haven't driven a car since you got rid of your car. Like not even rental or anything? Just like,
No.
Really?
2014, yeah, it'll be 10 years in June.
That is super, super cool. Nick is scrolling through, what is this? Is this your
blog.
Instagram or your blog?
It's the blog.
Yep.
Nice.
Yep, and
That's
it's on
super
Tumblr,
cool.
so it's shareable.
Nice. Yeah, and I like just seeing this, like you see the world differently as you're walking around, and I think that'll hopefully inform some of our questions when we get back to that. Real quick, just at the top of the show, where can people go to follow you?
Sure. So the blog is walkingdetroit.blog. And you can also find me at Walking Detroit on Instagram and on Twitter and on TikTok. So it's just at Walking Detroit.
That's fantastic. Awesome. We're stoked to have you here. The way we do the show is pretty casual, so just jump in, hop in whenever you have a comment to make, something to say, something to add. We're pretty casual about it. You're just one of us, one of the co-hosts for today. And with that, I'll send things over to Ethan for an update.
Awesome.
An update. Oh, yes. So recently, I don't know if you folks are aware of this. Well, that'll also be another topic. I believe Alex is going to be discussing that. But recently, the Line 2 extension of the Seattle Link opened up. It's a bit more of a West Coast story, but it was super exciting to see it open up. But one of the things that I found incredibly hilarious is that it started with a half-hour delay. The reason for the half-hour delay was because of the speeches that people at Sound Transit were giving were going on for too long. So it caused a half-hour delay for the first trains to run through. And personally, I don't think that there's a funnier way that you could get a half-hour delay, nor a more understandable way.
Yeah.
But it is really cool. We've talked about this a few times on the podcast about Line 2 and how exciting of a project this is for just transit in general in the U.S. and especially for the Seattle area. I mean, it's really cool. I saw plenty of people who were covering the event live. Really awesome. But yeah, now that it's open, I mean, it's exciting, and I can't wait for the second portion of it to open.
Yeah, and that's a light rail project, right?
Yes, it is.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's great to see more of that happening. I'll give a quick update here about where I've been. Last week, Rachel was kind enough to take my spot on the show and chat with these guys about news and stuff. Well, I've been attending this public hearing. In the comments in the chat, we've got, I know Jen and Austin are watching us live, and they've been participating in this public hearing as well. We're talking in Calgary about upzoning the city to allow for townhomes to be built, and people are really acting like the sky is falling. There have been some pretty funny moments throughout this public hearing that I'm sure I will be sharing over the course of my whole life, because I have enough for a lifetime. It has been, I think today was day 9 of this public hearing. Day 9. This is the longest public hearing in Calgary's history, maybe on planet Earth. This has been a huge, crazy, bonkers, bananas marathon. Over 1,000 people signed up to speak. Everybody gets 5 minutes to speak, to say whatever they want to say, and they walk up to the podium. They can say whatever. They can insult people, and then the mayor just says, "Thank you for your presentation."
That's a lot of minutes.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
crazy.
It's insane.
Crazy, you guys. And people can still sign up. You can still sign up until the last speaker has spoken.
He's like, I want the pain to go on. Just make it longer.
I mean, we got to release them from this captivity eventually. I feel a little bit bad still encouraging people to come and speak in favor, because I'm kind of like, maybe we should just give up. Maybe we should just
You could
stop.
keep petitioning people to go and
Just
signing
keep-
up.
just
that
keep pushing
it.
it.
Never ends. Like
We
it's
honestly,
perpetual.
we could.
It's
we
like
could
overtime in hockey. Just keeps going.
Just keeps going. Let it keep going. So, yeah,
They'll pass as soon as this is over. I can just take a guess. They're gonna pass some sort of limit on how many people can sign up for public comment. That would be my guess. They're gonna try and do something like that.
Well, so it's interesting. That's not up to the city to decide. That's a provincial legislation. So that'll be up to the province, which I might make a mention later about the province not necessarily being a friend of the municipalities sometimes. So I think they might want to encourage the torture. But yeah, we'll see. I have hope that it will pass, that we'll get this upzoning to happen. We'll see what kind of amendments come forward and stuff. But yeah, if you're in Calgary, please sign up and speak in favor. We need all the voices we can get to say yes to RCG upzoning. But that's the end of that update. We'll throw this over to Nick for his.
Yeah, it's continuation. I just wanted to say, like, even whether or not this goes through, I got to say congratulations to you, because it's been really inspiring to see you push so hard to get people into this, and then also for speaking, because some people are afraid to do that. So I feel like the way you're going about it with Unsprawling is just really, yeah, like I said, it's really inspiring, and I'm really happy to see that. But also your actual speech, or the time you had to talk, was fantastic, because I watched so much of the stuff you've put out of other people speaking, and they were very good, very factual, but you built a story where you had all of the emotions and everything built into the way that we perceive these things. And you talked about these stories when you were a kid, when changes were happening, and how you didn't like them, you hate these changes. But then as they kind of set in place, you saw the benefit that they had on your life. And I think that really came through, and hopefully somebody, at least one person, saw that and said, okay, like this could be something good for us in the future, something that might look painful, but it will actually be good for us. So yeah, very well done. I was like, I wouldn't expect anything less than that from Alex here on the podcast. So yeah,
Thanks.
Always just smashing it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I was on a good panel too. Those two guys you can see, and an arm of another guy you can see in that video. They were fantastic speakers as well. And one of them, the guy whose arm you can see, he joined me on one of the recap episodes. I've been doing these nightly recaps after the public hearing to kind of talk about how we're feeling about it and kind of extend that conversation to because it's a long hearing. Not everybody can tune in for the whole thing, but that's on the Unsprawling YouTube channel, which is a very specific Calgary focused YouTube channel talking about our built environment and how we get around it. Yeah, thanks for saying that, Nick. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. But we've had a bunch of comments specifically for Ethan, and they came in when he wasn't here a few weeks ago. But one of them I thought was really great. Well, one of them was kind of rude, but it was basically talking about how you didn't make any mistakes and they were surprised by that. I'm like, come on. Come on. He's always on point. And there was just that one time that he messed up and said train bad. But guess what? I did the same thing the next week. So, hey, we can all be forgiven, right? But
I appreciate the call outs. I'm not the positive energy of Alex and Nick here.
Yeah.
I try to keep positive, but then I also have a little bit of hater energy that's there. So, I do kind of attract that vibe to me.
Yeah, but is it Jesperly or Jesperly on YouTube commented, said, Ethan, try not to say folks challenge. And I don't know if you've already said it or not this episode.
I have, actually. I said it like 5 or 10 minutes ago. Yeah, it's over. I failed the challenge. But, I mean, great gender-neutral term. I will continue to use it.
It is a great term. I love it. I've got something small to share here, and this is something that came across my YouTube page, and I watched it, and I thought it was fantastic. I'm going to turn off the audio here. And it's from Kiwi Rail, and you see people running across the tracks, trying to get across the tracks as the lights are flashing, and it's about near misses, and you can see somebody just get across the tracks as the train goes by, and
oh my God.
It was a PSA that was released about 5 years ago, just trying to warn people that obviously it's not safe. You don't want to get hurt, right? But moreover, it's about the people who are inside the train, the people who have to live with that every day, with those, not only the near misses, but the actual accidents that happen. So they have to, it's something to think about. So what they've done is they've actually set up these crosses with an arm missing on the right side. They put up these signs where a near miss happened with a QR code, so people can scan the QR code and watch the video of the near miss as a reminder to try to be safer. But it also brings up the question about why we have more like fences coming down where the pedestrians are crossing. Because even you think about people getting distracted, it's going to happen. People are going to be on the phone, they're going to have their headphones on. And they even show a video of a woman on the phone, like very narrowly getting hit and then not even realizing, then finally turning around like, holy fuck, there was a train that just like missed me. Like, oh my God. But yeah, it's a good watch. This is called Every Near Miss Has an Impact - Rail Safety Week 2019 from Kiwi Rail. Yeah, it's an interesting little video.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Actually, and maybe I should just put a quick plug for the Rio Grande plan here while we're talking about rail projects and removal of level crossings. I'll just put that out there. If you're in Utah, look up the Rio Grande plan and check out what they're doing and get involved with what they're doing there. With that, let's get on to Jen's story here. What is this General Motors
Kristin.
moving out of...
Kristin.
Or Kristin. Why did I... Oh, I said Jen because she's in the comments there. Sorry, Kristin.
No worries.
What's this Rensen?
The Renaissance Center is our towers that are on the Detroit River, and it's home to General Motors. So the GM headquarters has been occupying this building since, I think, the 70s. Could be wrong, but it's part of the Detroit skyline. I don't know if someone wants to pull up a picture of it, but there's these big towers, and I did this fun project blog called Art in the Stations, where I visited all 13 people mover stations in Detroit, which is our little circle rail system that back in the day in the 80s when it was built really made a lot of sense because Detroit wasn't very walkable. It was a pretty dangerous rundown city. So people didn't want to walk from one neighborhood downtown to the next, so they took the people mover. Now downtown's awesome. But one little hidden gem that people don't know about is there's art in each people mover station. So I visited the Renaissance Center, which is belovedly called the Rensen, and I walked around for the first time when I was doing this project, and I kind of became fascinated with it because it's such an empty tower. There's some restaurants. There's a 71st floor restaurant called the Highlands, and it has some of the best views of the whole city. But, people don't have access to it unless they go to the restaurant. And I thought, oh my gosh, GM only occupies a tiny percentage of these towers. This would be such an awesome community here. It's right on the river. There's transit, that connects, right into the building. And it's crazy because after walking around back in January, February, March, repeatedly kind of manifesting in my mind, what could this be? We've tweeted about it. People have, said GM has occupied this space and has held on to it for so long. Yet, there's such untapped potential here with housing, commerce, and community.
Yeah, it's really iconic because I grew up not far from Windsor, Ontario. I have family that still lives in Windsor. And when you walk along the Detroit River, it dominates the Detroit skyline. Like like if you have the lighting right, it's almost like an evil layer, like this giant tower with the towers around it. So I haven't visited. Maybe I have once. I think when I was a teenager for the Detroit Auto Show. I don't know how long ago that was, like 20 years ago now, but I think it took place there. It must have. Is the Rensen the entire kind of area with like all of those the towers combined?
Yeah. So all of those towers, they did a revitalization project maybe in 99 or 2000 where it used to be a fortress. It was all boarded up, but now there's a beautiful space along the Riverwalk. So there's steps so GM employees can sit by the river during their lunch. There's a really cool like glass, I don't know what they call it. Gosh, what do they call it? It's just really neat because there's a beautiful view of the river from inside one of the towers. And so, there's a Panera Bread in there. There's, a Starbucks. You've got like the employee stuff, but I would walk around there and it was so empty. And I thought, wow, we could build so much housing in these. And just how cool of a community it would be, especially to live right on the river. And now GM is moving out of it and they're moving downtown. So it's coming true. So now, the towers are up for who knows what. So it really, it really makes a lot of people's imagination run wild. And if you see there along Jefferson, I would ride my bike a lot along the Riverwalk, and there's just empty parking lots. And GM has occupied those too. We had the Grand Prix there, and so now I'm assuming, they might host it somewhere else. Just how much park space that we could build and placemaking potential.
Yeah. I love that when you kind of go around and you go for these walks, that you're able to think of your community in such a different way and kind of picture like, what if we did this with this space instead? And especially now that, cities all over the place are doing these office to residential conversions, that would be something really, really interesting to see, to create like this big mixed use community in this iconic structure.
Yeah. And what like a thing to put in people's headspace to think GM's headquarters has now become this walkable community. Like, get the car guys out of here. This is now going to be a space for the people. Like, that is just like such a transformation, right?
I'm just shocked too, because I was walking around like manifesting that in my mind back in the winter, thinking, wow, this would be so cool. This would be so cool. And then all these people on Twitter are like, that'll never happen. That'll never happen. And now they're moving out. Like, it's like weird. Like, just like I moved to Detroit in 2022, I didn't think, there would be all these new bus lines. There would be, pushes for transit. GM would be moving out of the Renaissance Center. Like, never in my wildest dreams did I think that would happen 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's.
Jeez.
I mean, the Rencen is like, it's one of the most iconic buildings by this one architect named John Portman. And one of his big things was he was this big mid-century modern he loved designing buildings with atriums. If you pull up any John Portman building, they are like the heaven of atrium. If you're a fan of atriums, the best architect you could imagine. Like, he is just big with that design. But one thing that really is kind of emphasized with that is that his designs are very, very car-centric. So most of his designs that you'll see don't cater a whole lot to transit. And you can kind of see it with the Rencen, just with the only connection to transit being the people mover, and obviously being General Motors headquarters for so long. But yeah, I mean, it does make a lot of sense to convert the building over to being a more mixed-use, walkable building, rather than, basing itself entirely on the car. I mean, you're going to deal with some sort of, isolation from the rest of the city network just with how the building's kind of set up. But you could build a very mixed-use community just within the building itself and then connect it to the rest of Detroit through, the people mover.
Yeah.
And there are buses. There's the Jefferson bus that goes right by the 9. And, I'll take that to our Meyer River, we've got like a grocery store and, there's some things that do connect it. There's the Skywalk that goes to the Millender Center, which also is a part of the People Mover system. So it goes Financial District, Millender Center, Renaissance Center, Bricktown, Greektown, and then it, loops back around downtown. But I just think all the time about how cool it would be, because there is a certain element of the Renaissance Center community that reminds me of like Wall Street, downtown Manhattan, where at night it just shuts down.
Right.
There's not places to go. So if there were to be a community there, housing more restaurants, cafes, parks, it would really bring Detroit to life and activate that part of the city.
Well, and like you said, it's right along the Riverwalk there too, right? And I think with all those parking lots too, I don't know. Now you've got me thinking about this, and I'm looking at gobbling this up and like spitting out some really nice like riverfront walkable mixed use community. Like, you could really do absolutely incredible with this space. I'm curious, like, is there another or in Detroit, do you feel like it has a lot of potential to kind of make that transition into a walkable city? And what are some of the key elements that allows that or opens up that opportunity?
Totally. So on the other side of Hart Plaza, so there's the Renaissance Center, there's Hart Plaza, along the Riverwalk. Then on the opposite end, there's like Huntington Place, which is our big convention center where the auto show is. But right past that is the old Joe Louis Arena site. So that's where the Red Wings played. And they actually just built a new building called the Residences at Water Square, which is also a part of the People Mover. It was the Joe Louis stop. Now it is the West Riverfront stop. So they're building a hotel there and kind of a walkable community in that space. Right now, they just have the building. I mean, these units start at like $2,200 a month for a studio. The windows don't even open, right? It's just all glass. So it's cool. I haven't toured it yet. They did use some of my pictures for their marketing, which was fun, which was kind of fun. But Detroit for me has been extremely walkable. And that's because, I don't have kids. I'm not tied down to a suburban environment. So I do live in a building in the middle of the city, a few blocks away from Little Caesars Arena. I have a Whole Foods I can walk to, markets, bus lines on either side of me, the queue lines outside my door. For me, it really works as a walkable city because I don't have a need to really go to the suburbs. And if I do, I can take the Smart Bus or I can go to Ann Arbor on the D2A2 bus. So for me, it really works. Most people haven't even thought about it, which is really interesting because they're like, it's the Motor City. But I'm like, I've gotten by without driving here.
Yeah.
And I don't even need to take Lyfts or Ubers because for me, it is walkable. And it feels, if they've really done a great job with density downtown, with filling in shops, restaurants, cafes, salons, gyms. So I feel safe even, walking at night. I don't do it a whole lot just because, the element of being, a woman walking down the street at night, I don't love it. But I used to work in hospitality downtown. And if I would work on a Saturday night and walk home, it is so busy downtown with events that I feel really safe.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
The word hasn't spread yet, I feel. People in our circles obviously hear about it. I've obviously learned a lot about the micromobility that's happening there with the Joe Louis Greenway and stuff like that. But it hasn't spread wide. When people talk about Detroit and just casual conversation, it's definitely in the mindset of how it used to be. The donut, right? They call it Detroit the donut. Like the middle's just terrible. You don't want to go there. It's hollowed out. And everybody lives in the outer suburbs, this ring around the city center, right? But it's really changed a lot. And I'm looking forward to going back. It sounds amazing.
Yeah, it really does. I'm excited to see what comes of it. I've never been to Detroit, but I'm excited to see that that even in a city that I think everybody, the Motor City, that you can make it by without a car. I think a lot of people underestimate that. We're going to get on to our next story. We will have more questions for you here. And I will say, if anybody watching live has any questions that we should be asking Kristin when we get to those questions, put them in the chat and we'll make a note of those. That could be kind of interesting to see what people are wondering for you. But we'll get on to Ethan's story here if you want to go ahead.
I don't want to cut you off here, Alex, but we have people watching live? How are they doing this?
Oh yeah, I get. Did we not mention this at the beginning?
I don't think we mentioned this. Maybe you could tell us, Alex.
Yeah, I'll fill everybody in. So Nick was like, "Hey, we can do live shows. Let's do live shows." And it's something that we talked about when we were first starting the show as something that we wanted to work towards. So now, if you are a patron, a Patreon supporter, you can get access to the live shows and join us live. There's a chat that you can ask questions. And so we're going to have a little bit more audience participation here, where this is our first one, so we're kind of experimenting. But it's basically the same thing. We don't do any editing to this anyways.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want access to that, join the Patreon.
Yeah, and we can welcome new members, our latest members here. Halls Emporium, Zaffarali A, and Andrew, thank you so much for supporting us on Patreon. We really appreciate it. But yeah, even if you don't want to listen to the live show, you can get early access, the earliest access to the show possible, and we're going to have Discord access as well.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But on Ethan.
Well, thank you so much, patrons, for supporting the channel. But as we get into our first story here, it's a pretty quick one, nothing too crazy. But this story comes to us from Amtrak, and it's coming to us from the Midwest. So, for the past couple of years, there's been some talk in the Amtrak Midwest routes about possibly reviving an older service that ended during the mid-60s. This route connected Minneapolis and the Twin Cities to Chicago through some Wisconsin cities like Milwaukee and some other ones, some smaller stations. But Amtrak has just announced that after over 50 years of no service on this line, that we are going to be getting regular regional service between the Twin Cities and Chicago. This route is going to be called the Borealis, and it is going to be opening May 23rd, 2024. So, it's going to be opening in a couple weeks. We're going to have some more regional rail within the U.S. It basically follows the existing route of the Empire Builder. However, it's not going to have any chance of being getting any chance of being delayed crossing the country when you're taking it between Minneapolis and Chicago. Because if you're taking it, the current setup right now with the Empire Builder is it starts in Seattle and ends in Chicago. And if you're getting on in St. Paul, Minneapolis, and you want to get to Chicago, you might possibly have to deal with multiple hours of delays from the train crossing the entire country. So this route is going to be pretty exciting. It's going to increase reliability on trains between, Chicago and the Twin Cities, and it'll be more options for rail travel for people. It's not going to be high, it's just going to be regional 79 mile an hour top speeds, but regardless, still a great connection for people, especially those who don't have cars and those who don't want to make the driving trip between the cities.
That's awesome. That's super exciting. Yeah. How long did you say that this area has kind of been?
It's been over 50. It's been
train?
over 50 years since there's been like actual regional rail that doesn't go long distance. So it's been a minute. I believe that I believe it was the Chicago and Northwestern that ran that route, but yeah,
that's wild.
A lot of rail routes in the U.S. are finally starting to come around, and this is all due to that bipartisan infrastructure act that passed a couple years ago. So this is directly the result of that kind of funding going into our infrastructure and providing some actual tangible results.
That's super exciting. Yeah. Do you think? I'm curious. It takes a lot to keep rail up and keep rail active, and it takes political will. It takes money, right? It takes ridership. Are you optimistic about Amtrak, being able to continue to sustain this? I'm hopeful that we continue to get more rail in North America. But what's your outlook, Ethan, as our resident?
That's an
foamer?
Excellent question, Alex. But the thing about Amtrak is that a lot of it also kind of delves down to regional funding. So a lot of these routes, if they're under 800 miles, can't really receive a whole ton of federal funding. So most of these routes that are under 800 miles, these regional corridors, are mostly getting funded by states. So it really all comes down in a lot of forms to the states that they run through. So, for example, California with its Caltrans routes, like the San Joaquins, the Capital Corridor, Pacific Surfliner, are going to be, they're going to stick around a little bit more. They're going to have more, staying power than, say, I don't know, a route like Louisiana is getting a route that's going to be running into Alabama, like Mobile. That's going to be a new regional service that's starting up. It probably won't have as firm support as, say, a route running through California or the Midwest, but it will it's going to be existing. It's receiving state funding, and it really all comes down to state governments on these shorter routes. But me personally, we've been seeing renewed interest for rail. Cities know that they benefit a lot from rail routes starting up again, and I'm fairly optimistic that states are going to be continuing their support. Some of the real big ones, though, have been Michigan. Michigan's been doing a really good job wanting to restart rail service in the state, and they've been doing it for a while. Ohio's been looking at starting up some more rail service, especially through Amtrak. North Carolina's been another big one, and Louisiana, surprisingly, has been a pretty big one when it comes to actually getting some more regional routes. But I am excited. I think it's going to continue to grow, and hopefully we continue to see more of these short regional routes, spur up.
That's exciting. Yeah, hopefully it continues to go on. I was just reading back through the chat. It's nice to see some activity in there. If people have questions for Kristin, we're going to be asking her some questions in a little bit here. But speaking of rail, I'm going to share a rail story too. I don't know how much Ethan has seen or heard about this. Have you heard about this one, Ethan?
I have heard about this one. It is pretty exciting as well,
yeah.
too.
Yeah, you guys have no idea how excited I am for this one. Some passenger rail has been announced for Alberta, or at least the plan to make a master plan.
A plan for a plan.
A plan for a plan. But the good news is our Premere, though I don't like almost anything her and her colleagues do at the provincial level, I appreciate that she is a foamer. I am not a fan of her, but I am a fan of her being a fan of trains. So we'll take the win here. So let me tell everybody a little bit about what this plan is. So for the past forever, we have been talking about doing some passenger rail in Alberta. Calgary and Edmonton, we're 3 hours apart driving, and we've got a big busy highway between the two cities. These are both cities of about 1.5 million-ish people, both looking to reach that 2 million mark soon enough. Both growing very quickly, and we're looking to connect those two cities with some commuter rail. So here's kind of what this plan is. This is coming from Global News here. The plan will be split into 6 parts, including a commuter rail system connecting Calgary International Airport to the city's downtown core, a commuter rail system connecting the Edmonton International Airport to the city's downtown, regional rail lines from Calgary and Edmonton to Banff and Jasper National Parks, a regional rail line between Calgary and Edmonton with a local transit hub in Red Deer, which is pretty much exactly in the middle between the two cities, a hub connecting the provincial rail system to LRT systems in big cities, and then a rail line connecting Grande Prairie and Fort McMurray, which are two cities north in Alberta here. I'm sure this will eventually connect down to Lethbridge and Medicine Hat as well, two cities in southern Alberta. But yeah, I'm like,
this is amazing.
I'm like super
this is incredible.
stoked by this. This is like, yeah. And here's the thing with this plan too. This isn't just a like the plan is to create like an implementation. The plan isn't just like this is not a feasibility study. This is okay, our plan is to start construction on this line first, then this line, then this line, then this line. And the intention is to have a 15-year completed build out of this plan. So 2042, you guys, because they're saying, 2027 we'll start construction. 2042, I'll be riding rail anywhere in Alberta. Is it Nick? You've got the map pulled up there. Yeah, so we can see Edmonton there on the map, Fort McMurray to the north there, and then Grande Prairie is kind of
it's over here. It's around here, isn't it? This way.
Down a bit.
There it is.
Yeah. There's Grande Prairie, and then down in the south we've got Calgary there, Red Deer exactly in the middle. And here's the thing: it is pretty flat and pretty straight between the two cities. Perfect location for some fantastic high-speed rail. So yeah, we're super excited about this. And here's the thing. People are shocked by this. People are saying like, I'll believe it when I see it. I have some friends who have interacted with Premier Smith personally, and they're like, yeah, she is like fully behind this project. This is a project that really matters to her. This is kind of probably going to be like a legacy sort of thing. But yeah, they even said I don't know if this was Smith who said this or if it was the transportation minister, but they said expanding our roads, freeways, and highways to be 6 or 8 or 10 lanes all the way across is not always feasible, nor is it always wise. So that's pretty based. So I'm super excited for this. We're gonna do a live from this one.
This is amazing, and I really hope it happens. And if it does, okay, the other premieres, if you're not listening, but if you're listening, I'm looking at you right now, David Eby, and former NDP head in BC, and Doug Ford and his Conservative Party, and the previous Liberal Party that was ahead of Ontario. Shame on you. Whether or not this gets done, shame on you already, but doubly shame on you if this happens and a Conservative leader in Alberta builds rail before you. What the fuck is wrong with you? Oh my God. Anyway,
it's
you
definitely
gotta just shame the other provinces.
One thing, no one is listening from the government. I will say this, but one thing I do have to say is that they should not sweat making this the highest high-speed rail possible. They should get down the track. They should take a look into getting down the fastest speed possible in the quickest amount of time, and then work on building it up from there. Because I'm going to be brutally honest here. Calgary to Edmonton does not need 220-mile-an-hour trains. Like it would be.
It does.
It does.
It does.
It does.
No, but even if it's whatever, like 120 miles per hour,
if it can get it,
that'd be plenty fast.
Ideally,
Yeah.
you get it up over 150, but 125, I don't think anybody's complaining about that because
What's the speed of the highway there? It's 100, 110 kilometers per
Yeah.
hour, not miles.
We're
Kilometers per hour.
exactly.
I'm talking
Like 70 miles an hour.
I'm talking freedom units.
Yeah.
They're talking in their Canadian whatever.
Our commie socialism.
They're
Yeah.
north of the border,
Northern,
commune socialism.
North
We don't have to
Pole.
worry about trains down here in America, folks. The automobile is king.
Yeah.
Ignore the Northeast
Yeah.
corridor. Ignore Brightline West.
Yeah, but this is a super exciting project, and it's great that it has like actual action attached to it. So we should be getting the plan for that summer 2025 is when the rail master plan should be published. So I'm beyond stoked for this project. It'll be great for so many reasons. I mean, connecting the two airports. The Edmonton airport flies out to Calgary like dozens and dozens of times a day, just so that they can get out to the rest of the world. Because from Calgary we fly all over the place, and so. Yeah, making that connection will be fantastic. Just being able to, like, the amount of traffic between the two cities is huge. So this is some super ultra mega amazing fantastic news. I couldn't be more excited. So I'm excited to see the master plan come
Yeah.
out for that.
And it sounds like they care about feeder routes too.
Yes, and that is a big thing. That is a big thing that they talked about is the importance of the network. This, like, it really helps that our Premere does not have to get over any cognitive dissonance when you introduce her to these topics. Like, she's already fully on board. She knows the stuff. She knows the benefits of rail over cars. So she's already there. It's just kind of making sure that these projects happen and giving some encouragement and making sure that there's the public will and the political will to make it happen. But with that, let's get on to Nick's story.
Yeah, this is a real quick one. This is coming from, I first saw it on Fuck Car subreddit, and it's just an image that was posted of a tweet. It was a tweet reply, rather, and it brought up an interesting, let's just say, term that I had never heard before. And anyway, I'm just going to read this. So first, somebody had posted a picture of a new makeshift roundabout. They had used concrete pipes filled with dirt and some plants to create, a typical kind of roundabout that you might want to have in your neighborhood. And somebody replied to this. They said, not a mini roundabout. And this is creating a deadly fixed object, DFO, for errant vehicles. There are better and safer ways to calm traffic for all users, such as an actual mini roundabout. So, yeah, the word there, if you didn't notice, was deadly fixed object, DFO, as if, maybe perhaps somebody on their bike would, be cruising down the neighborhood street and run into it and die. No, that wouldn't make sense. Somebody walking might run into it. No, who could, what would happen? Oh, maybe it's the car speeding in the neighborhood that is the deadly object, the moving deadly object, right? It's not the fixed object that's the problem. Come on, guys. It's the cars. We know it's the cars. And this is the whole point. To have these obstructions is to say, hey, this is not a safe place to speed, right? And it's the whole conversation we have about neighborhoods where there'll be a giant strode, and on the side of the street, right behind where people will stand to cross the street, there is a light pole with sheer pins so that if a car hits it, the pole falls over. Nobody's talking about the pedestrian who's standing right in front of it, right? And that's the thing. It's this car-centric way of thinking where, oh, you got to watch out. If somebody crashes the car, it might be dangerous for the person in the car. It's like, no, we need to slow down the cars. It's the whole point. It's the whole point of this roundabout is to slow you down. Anyway.
So I know that you pulled this image off of Reddit, but I actually saw the original tweet. The person who commented the thing, not the deadly fixed object, but was showing off the good infrastructure. Good mutual of mine. I will shout them out, even though it's blurred out here. Rice Rust Belt is their Twitter handle. Great poster, but the other person, I'll keep them anonymous just to prevent any dog piling there. They are an actual street planner So, if you want to know where some of our wonderful, creative, terms like deadly fixed object come from, and why a lot of our streets don't have these wonderful road diets, they come from the street planner mindset of we need to move traffic through everywhere as efficiently as possible. And as quickly as possible.
When you see those giant stroads too, there'll be those barriers, not the Jersey barriers, but what are they called? K-rails, I think. Mm-hmm. And the ones that when a car crashes into it, they give way, right, to give some kind of cushion to the car crashing into it. But right beside that, on the side closest to the street, is a sidewalk. It's the same thing. Just like there's no thought to the people walking on the sidewalk and their safety in these designs. It's terrible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this might be kind of a good segue into our questions for Kristin here. Mm-hmm. I want to know does Detroit do anything helpful for pedestrians, for like pedestrian safety? Do you see bollards around very often? Like, what is that sort of traffic calming and pedestrian kind of protection from cars look like in Detroit?
There isn't a lot of protection that I've noticed. I mean, we have, decent sidewalks, which is nice. We have some protected bike lanes. We've got some bollards. We have some, cement with plants on a few of the different roads, separating the traffic from bikes and pedestrians, which is nice. But, there isn't a whole lot that's put into place. I know some people that are landscape architects, and they have, done pretty good job with placemaking and trying to make, some areas more walkable, which is nice. We have on top of the Joe Louis Greenway, we have the Southwest Greenway, we have DeQuinder Cut. And so we have some completely separated spaces for bikes and pedestrians. But they really don't connect neighborhoods, on a level that really gets people from point A to point B. It's more recreational. So
right.
It's kind of interesting to see, there are ways that we can connect neighborhoods, but, for everyday use, it's not that typical. We don't see a lot of people like me who walk as transportation. So there hasn't been a whole lot of thought put into it on a design level.
That's kind of disappointing. I mean, I know there are people in these professions who are trying hard. I had a conversation with one of Calgary's city planners talking about this. There's a big project going on in Calgary right now called the Street Manual, and it's more of a technical document, but it outlines the allowed width of lanes, the width of sidewalks and bike lanes, and where we put those things, and how we make safe pedestrian crossings and things like that. And we're seeing more raised crossings in Calgary, and so there's some progress happening, but it is really frustrating when some of these things are still talked about, like you're talking about, like it's just like a recreational use, right? Like
right.
It's not going to get you anywhere. But hey, was that fun? That was a nice day out. Now put your bike back on the bike rack and drive home.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting too, because right before I moved down here, I was connecting with people, that were in the bike community, and I mentioned, meeting up or whatever, and a lot of people that have meetups are like way far away from me. And so I'm like, you drive to these meetups to ride for fun. I'm riding because this is like one of my primary methods of transportation.
Yeah.
I'm not riding 20 miles to ride 10 miles to ride 20 miles home. That's a little impractical. But
yeah.
It's interesting because we have this new bridge, the 2nd Avenue Bridge, that connects like Wayne State campus with the North End. And they put the protected lane, like they protect the people, but then the bike lane is next to the cars. So like they're not thinking design wise. It's insane how, with civil engineering, they're just not thinking. And I interviewed with a company a couple of months ago that was a civil engineering company that worked with MDOT. I didn't get the job. It was a marketing role. And I think probably one of the reasons I didn't get the job is because I'm car free. Mm-hmm. And I'm an advocate for walkability. And they totally ghosted me. And then I got a call from an outside staffing like recruiter for that job, and I was like, hey, I already interviewed for that. But it's interesting because one of the people I interviewed with, they worked on a project actually up in Traverse City, and we were talking about like driving out of the state park and how there's no light and how it's very dangerous because right there by the Traverse City State Park is US 31. So people are driving in from Acme and off of the, you get off the freeway like near Cadillac and then drive into Traverse City. And so there's a lot of heavy traffic there because of the hotels, because of tourism, and there's a lot of accidents there. And it's just so interesting how with civil engineers, they're not thinking about the safety aspect, the pedestrians, biking, and it's really a shame.
No, we need to get everybody in a car, and we need to get them through the thoroughfare as fast as possible. There's no transit. There's no way of getting around any other way. Why would you walk somewhere?
Humans need
Why
not
would
apply.
You bike somewhere.
Yeah.
The car is perfect automotive freedom, and you need to take that from point A to point B, and we're going to make sure that that thoroughfare is as wide and as fast as possible for you.
It is funny when people know that you don't drive. Everywhere you go, everyone will ask, "How did you get here?" It's like this weird mystery.
It's a black hole in their mind. Like they haven't experienced it. A lot of them.
They're like, I don't understand. Yeah. Austin Serson, one of our patrons here. We went to a lacrosse game at the Saddle Dome in Calgary here last weekend, I think, and we biked there. Austin came to my place. He put on my summer tires on my bike, and then we biked down there. And we had hardly any interaction with cars. We biked through the river valley. It was fantastic. Mm-hmm. And the bike path goes right into the parking lot. We went past the lineup of cars, through the parkade, and we went up and just locked our bikes up to the bike rack. And when we left, we unlocked and we rode past this big lineup of cars and just got on our way. There are other ways to get around our city, and we need to educate people on that. We've got another question for you, Kristin. Nick, do you want to take this question from Jen?
Sure, yeah. This is coming from our live chat from Jen, and she says, do you bike in the winter, or do you park it until the spring?
It depends on the weather, but yes, I do bike in the winter. I was up in Traverse City. So I got my bike in 2020 during COVID, and so... up there, it's much snowier than it is down here in Detroit. And so when it wasn't icy, I would bike. And then in Detroit, we didn't really get that much snow this year. So if it's super, super cold, it's not that fun, honestly. But if it's mild, if it's not super icy, I will bike.
Okay,
yes.
you don't do any treatments, like you don't get studded tires or anything. You just...
I haven't, but okay. I think that's something I would be interested in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, you're not going to bike if it's icy, then it wouldn't be needed otherwise. But yeah,
because there is a level of crazy here in Detroit with the drivers, and so I do kind of use my discretion, and that goes with the bus too. Like I don't necessarily go like super far out because even though downtown, midtown, a lot of the areas in Detroit are developed, they're nice. There is, a certain element of Detroit where it isn't rebuilt. There is a lot of, there are a lot of neglected neighborhoods. So I don't necessarily go to those places. And they are under, like Ethan and I've talked about, underutilized with transit. We don't have a lot of great transit to the outside neighboring communities, which is unfortunate. Just like there's not a lot of density in those communities either. Mm. So I don't necessarily go there that much because I can't guarantee that I'll get home reliably on the bus.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is an important point about that connectivity, and it kind of links in with this next question. Ethan,
of course,
would you be able to read this
absolutely.
question from Austin?
Question for Kristin. How much of a game changer is the new bus from downtown Detroit to the airport? I don't know too much about it, except that there is now being a bus. Is it reasonably priced, fare integrated with the regular public transit, or exclusive from the fare system? Or an exclusive fare system?
Yeah, so it's independent from our DDOT system. And so I believe it's $12 to ride to the airport or to the city from DTW. I haven't taken it. I haven't had a need to. I think it might be fun just to do it, to see what the experience is like. So maybe I'll do a blog post and share, on my Instagram. Maybe I'll even do a live one day, getting to the airport. But it is a game changer completely because Romulus is not close. There was no other way easy to get to the airport. So I've seen a couple of other, people on Instagram and TikTok share their experiences. Someone from Outlier Media, I think Samaya went, and she shared it on Instagram, which I think is cool, to be able to have that connectivity. I think especially for events, big events like the draft, or, people that are car free like myself, or even people that don't want to have to park at the airport, I think is a really great system that we have. We had some people complaining about the location of the pickup and the drop off. It's right there on Washington Avenue, really close to the Book Tower downtown, which is also a new awesome development. It's residences, restaurants, and a hotel. People are like, oh gosh, we've got to walk 2 blocks to Grand Circus Park. And I'm like, oh my God, someone that walks like 5-6 miles a day. I'm like, but I guess people that are, disabled or, have a hard time walking, I guess they can take an Uber, it's better than nothing. But
Yeah.
I do find how hilarious people in Michigan don't want to walk a couple of blocks is. Like, it just boggles my mind.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's really like this problem of when all you have is a hammer, everything is a nail, right? Like, you just can't imagine getting around any other way. I was chatting with somebody the other day, and she was telling me that, she says, oh, I would never take transit. And she said, oh, I don't want the train. I don't want the train station in my neighborhood because it's going to bring crime. I'm like, criminals drive cars too, like,
Right.
and she says, yeah, but just anybody can get on the train. And I'm like, okay. All right. And she says, that's why I haven't taken transit in 20 years. It's so dangerous. And I'm like, listen, if you haven't taken transit in 20 years, how were you able to speak on it? What makes you think that you have any accurate opinion about what it's like? Mm-hmm. And I'm fine with criticisms of transit. I have many of my own. But I think it's important to experience something that you're criticizing, right? And that's why I think it's important to get around via these other modes so that you have some education and some awareness of what it's like,
Right.
And you're walking around Detroit and taking a look at different things and experience different things. And I find it really interesting. You brought this up at the beginning about almost like moving to Detroit. Like, you made it sound like you moved to Detroit on like a bet. Like, oh, I
double dog dare
get
you.
around Detroit. Yeah, and I mean, you've been doing it. I'm curious. This is one of the questions that we kind of thought of before the show here. I mean, it's Nick that always makes this list, but this is a great question. Having lived in New York and stuff, like how does Detroit stack up to places like New York City, Boston, Chicago, San Francisco? Like, where does Detroit fit in there, and maybe what could they do better?
I mean, obviously no train, no, underground rail system, no connectivity to other communities like the suburbs. So that's a huge one. In New York, I could easily go to Long Island by taking the Long Island Railroad. In San Francisco, I could take BART. Chicago has a great train system too. Boston as well. You could take the commuter rail. You can go to Newton on the Green Line. Like, it was cool living in different big cities. And I think, like, the love I have for transit, when I lived in Boston, I lived in Medford, Massachusetts for a while. So I took a bus into Boston, and then I would take, or I would take the bus to Cambridge, and then I would take the Red Line into the city, or I would take the bus to the Orange Line, which would take me in, the same way. So I was used to kind of like downsizing. It's like going from Manhattan to Boston to Detroit. It kind of got like less convenient. So I was used to working my schedule around the bus or where I could walk to, or finding jobs or opportunities or places to go that were accessible to me. Kind of like limiting, like my world got smaller, but I was okay with that. Where New York, I walked out my door, I could go to a store at 4 a.m. I would walk across the street and get a bagel. I would just go around the corner and get a coffee. Like, it was always convenient, no matter what. And I had to accept that it was less convenient when I went to Boston. I definitely had to accept it was way less convenient in Traverse City, my hometown. Because that was my trajectory. I went back to Traverse City for a few years before I came to Detroit. But, coming to Detroit really was kind of like a chance. I didn't know how accessible it would be, but I did have some friends that lived downtown that walked to work, and they loved it. And I thought, okay, if another friend of mine from Suttons Bay, Michigan did it and thought it was okay, let's see. I was actually between LA and here before I came here. Yeah. And LA is like super not walkable, right? But I knew some people, like influencers and people on Twitter that were car free in LA with e-bikes. And I was like, okay, cool, they do it. I had a lot of artist friends out there. And then I kind of got cold feet in July of 2022. And I'm like, I can't do this. And my mom and I came down to Detroit, and I kind of fell in love with downtown, applied to apartments, got this one, and I've been here ever since.
Interesting.
Okay, so having done LA, Detroit's better than LA?
I didn't go to LA. Like, I didn't even, no, I was thinking about it.
It was on the short list, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It was like, where do I go next? I thought about going back to New York, but I'm like, no. Because, I get overstimulated, and that's kind of what I like about Detroit, because it's chill. Downtown isn't super crowded. I'm still an outlier. There's not a lot of people doing what I'm doing, and I think that's fun.
Yeah. It comes through in your posts too on Instagram or your blog. Rarely do you have even a single person in any of your photos. I think there was one from the NFL draft day I remember seeing. But yeah, it's like it has that really emptiness. So it kind of ties into our next question. On your blog, you say, at the core, I'm an introvert who is passionate about solo exploration. You won't find me going out to eat much or going to many social gatherings. So some people consider the car to be the ultimate isolation device, where if you want to be alone, you can get in this little pod and you can travel around your city, wherever you want to, all by yourself, doing whatever you want, listening to things you want to. But you're car free, and you have been for 10 years. So can you talk a little bit about that, being someone who wants to be a self-described introvert? How is that, being car free?
Yeah, so it's interesting because when I lived in New York, I spent a lot of time just walking around looking at things. And on my personal Instagram, my posts on walking Detroit are very similar to how I did things in New York, in Boston, in Traverse City. Just walking around, looking at things, exploring, and being happy with that. Where I wrote that post that you're referring to because there's a lot of people in Detroit who are influencers who, post a restaurant or they post a place because they're paid to do it, right? And if I see a new restaurant or I go to a cafe, it's because I wanted to go to that cafe. There wasn't I wasn't incentivized to post it. It's just literally what I see as I'm out and about, enjoying my life, exploring things, and getting like inspiration. So I'm not big into consumerism. I'm not big into finding joy in external, and so that's kind of the point of the blog. It's like, wow, look how fun your life can be just by enjoying the world around you without having to spend money, without having to be around a group of people. I enjoy people. It has to be the right people, obviously. Like-minded people, right? Like, I'm not just going to go out. I'm not just going to, get paid to go to some event and post about it. Like, that's not my style. So I think being car-free, being able to enjoy parks, walking to work, biking around, like, that's super, like, introverty, but also I can meet really cool people that way. My kind of people. Other people that really have a passion for the environment, a passion for mindfulness, and adding to the community in their own unique way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting.
Definitely.
I mean, especially with the way that you move around, it seems like you'd be much more likely to meet people who are like-minded, especially if you're on a bike. Like, it's so much more easy to meet people on a bike than any other way. Even walking, sometimes I feel like it's a little less approachable, but there's like this camaraderie that comes out of biking around for some reason. Maybe it's the danger we all have to deal with.
Yeah.
It's interesting too, because there's a lady that I'm connected with on Twitter, and one day I was on the queue line and she's like, Kristin. And she's like, hey. And so like we started talking, and I've run into her a few times around town. I saw her at H&M one day.
Nice.
And then I was walking through the Belt, which is a cool activated alley downtown. It's a part of the Library Street Collective, which is an art, little museum gallery thing. And I was walking down there, and this guy's like, hey, you're walking Detroit. And it's just so fun. Like, the people that are into the same kind of things I'm into, you find each other. And that's really fun. Where you would not have those experiences if you were in a car.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it is really interesting. Even I've had that experience in Calgary. There's somebody who spoke at a council meeting, like a previous public hearing, and I really liked what he said. And then when I met him, I'm like, oh my goodness, you're so and so. I saw you on the live feed when you talked to council and you said this. I really appreciated what you said. And so it's really great to almost find those micro communities. I want to see, do we have any more questions for Kristin, or should we get on to some listener mail here?
Yeah, we check out some listener mail.
Yeah, let's check out some listener mail.
Yeah. Let's do this one from Sean Troy here. Ethan, do you want to read Sean's?
Yeah, absolutely.
Email or
So
comment?
this email comes from Sean Troy 3172, and they said, I just got back from my first bike ride in the Netherlands, about 7 kilometers both ways, between 2 little towns in the southwest of the country. I often hear critics of bike infrastructure saying that North America is too spread out for it to work, whereas Europe is very dense. But out here in Zeeland, the total population is less than that of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the population density is only about 220 per square kilometer, half of the country's average. Yet, there is safe bike infrastructure everywhere. What can we do to counter the narrative that bikes only work in big cities? What insights do y'all have about small town urbanism? I think I can answer this one pretty well here, because I used to bike commute in a city of about 13,000 people. And what I can really say here is that bike infrastructure really does encourage more people to bike. I mean, no, it's a no-brainer. I mean, if you build it, people will use it. And I mean, even in places where it really isn't super common to have bike infrastructure. For my example, I lived in St. Augustine, Florida. It's a small town about halfway between Jacksonville, Florida and Orlando, Florida. And it's small. It really kind of falls into that old urbanism design, but it really did encourage people to bike. And even though it does have a college there, one thing that you do notice a lot is that people do bike commute to their jobs a lot. And even though the city lacks true protected bike infrastructure, regardless of that, people were still using the roads, obviously in mixed-use lanes, but people were still using them to bike commute to jobs. And if you will still have this demand regardless of if you build the infrastructure or not. But what we really want to do is make it safer for everybody. So building out the actual proper bike infrastructure, at least in my mind, is not only going to make it safer for those to commute, but also for those, who are, thinking about it, but don't really want to because they don't feel safe. But yeah, I think that just building the infrastructure really does show that people will bike commute no matter no matter how small the city is.
Yeah, it's a narrative that always seems really strange to me because I grew up in a small town, like I said, not far from Detroit in Ontario, and we would bike everywhere. Was there any bike infrastructure? Absolutely zero. I was actually back there last summer. I didn't see any new bike infrastructure. That being said, like you're saying, Ethan, you need to have that infrastructure in certain places to get certain people biking. The thing I do really like about small towns, though, is that most people driving on those streets are people who live there. And having a small town usually has a community of people. So I feel like they're more kind, right? There's more of that sense of community. When you see someone, you might know them, and more likely to treat them more fairly on our streets and be more fair and giving people their space. But yeah, bike infrastructure is needed for people who aren't confident people on bikes. But to think that it doesn't work in small cities and it only works in big cities, it just doesn't make sense to me because everything's close together. Usually, most places, you could get from one side of the city or the town to the other on a bike, no problem. Is it going to be more than 5-7 kilometers? Unlikely.
Yeah. I think it's really important that when people are doing this comparison of density, they're doing like a really broad comparison of density, right? Like the entire continent of Europe versus the entire continent of North America. And I think it's really important that our cities don't have that big of a spread in density. And biking, you can get pretty far pretty comfortably depending on the terrain, and especially with e-bikes. I think you can manage pretty well. This kind of leads into our next question here, which I'm going to get Kristin to answer first. And this one comes from Jen Hall. Jen always sends like really fantastic questions for us to ask kind of at the end of the episode. And I want to hear, do you feel like the neighborhoods you live in are designed to encourage connection with your neighbors? How would you adjust the design to encourage more connection with your neighbors? What do you think, Kristin?
That's an interesting one. My neighborhood has a lot of commerce, which is really great. At the end of my street, there's a fun little community. There's a restaurant, a tattoo place, a bar, like a beer place, and a little shop, a dog place. I'd say we need to build more density to connect with our neighbors, truly. Like, I live in a building where there's, 90 some units, and we've got common spaces, we've got a patio upstairs, a gym, that kind of thing. But, I find it so car-centric still. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We do have a lot of apartment buildings. I live close to a college campus. But, I'd say filling it in is really important because we still have a lot of property that's kind of hoarded by the Ilitch family. The Ilitch family owns Little Caesars Arena, the Tigers, and a big portion of Detroit.
They've got a little bit of money. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so they own a lot of parking lots. They're hoarding a lot of buildings that haven't been redeveloped yet. So unfortunately, the density, that could be improved majorly. I think if I got a little bit deeper into my neighborhood, it would be a little bit easier to connect with neighbors, to connect with community. But I'm kind of in this weird, like block where, it's still being developed. So Detroit's interesting because we do have those dead zones. There are those areas where there's just nothing, and then you turn around and then there's, 4 restaurants and a few shops, but then you walk a block away and there's nothing. And that's the really interesting thing about Detroit, because it is being built from the ground up almost.
Yeah. Yeah, Detroit is really in an interesting situation with that. What about you, Ethan?
Well,
What do you
at the
think
moment,
you
I
could
mean,
do?
I live in a pretty basic single family zoned neighborhood. But I mean, you can still do quite a bit when it comes to actually, increasing your community in them. I think there's really two things that you could do with a neighborhood that's basically 100% single family zoning. One is to just kind of open it up to a little bit more density, things like ADUs, duplexes, triplexes. That would help out a lot. But I think what would really help bring community together is allowing for light commercial in these spaces. So allowing someone to open up a bike shop, like friend of the show Austin Surson has done, or opening up like a neighborhood coffee shop or something like that. Neighborhood corner store would be very, very helpful into actually, encouraging some more community within a neighborhood rather than making it the kind of isolating single family home suburbs that you would think about for about 90% of American development.
Yeah, totally. I think those things can definitely help. I don't have an actual answer about changing things. I'm not an urban planner or anything like that, but something I've noticed recently that's kind of a forgotten people mover that people don't think about, and it's a benefit of having towers, is elevators. And that's something that can help connect you with your neighbors. It's the people mover that a lot of people get into. It's a form of public transit, whether you like it or not. And it's somewhere where I've connected with so many of my neighbors in the past who have become very good friends of mine. And yeah, that's a place where you can meet people, which is kind of cool. Even though
Yeah.
tall buildings have a lot of other problems. So that's one good one for sure, I think.
It's interesting.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
interesting.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, please jump in.
One thing I forgot to mention about my building is I do live in a mixed use space. So we have a restaurant and stores downstairs, and it was cool because there was a food truck that was parked across the street. I could see it outside my window, and so I went down, got some food, met one of my neighbors because the owner of the food truck lives in my building, and then I stopped into the shop that's underneath where I live. And the lady from the food truck dropped off some food for the person that owned the shop. The person that was in the shop knew Walking Detroit, and like we all were talking, and I thought that was so cool how I'm really seeing those holes get filled in, and
Yeah.
that's changed since I moved here because they were all still being built when I moved into this space.
Yeah.
So we are seeing people going to the restaurant, people going to food trucks around, like I said earlier, running into people on the queue line. So that's been really fun to see. And seeing people in my lobby, talking to people in the elevator.
Yeah, I really like that insight. I recently visited a friend who lives in a tower here in Calgary, and he was showing me around, and he's got all sorts of things right there, and it's cool to see the little communities that can build there, and it's really cool to hear your experience doing Walking Detroit, kind of becoming like a little celebrity, like getting people talking about it and thinking about it, and hopefully more people moving in that direction. For me in my neighborhood, one of the things I think about, I would love to make the streets a place for community rather than a place for cars to go through, right? I remember playing street hockey on my street as a kid. I was fortunate to live on a frontage road of a main road, so the only people who came down there were going to park their car in front of their house. And I look out my front window, and I live in one of those 1960s bungalows here in Calgary. And I'd love to maybe, instead of having the parking space in front of my house because we don't use it, I'd love to extend that a little bit and make like some sort of parklet. I also think about like we live near some schools, and I'm like, what if we had like a little coffee shop just like randomly plopped down in the neighborhood that after the parents, maybe ride their kids to school on a bike, can pop in and have a quick coffee and hang out for a little bit and get some of that social time in. I think it's really important to think more creatively about our communities and about our spaces, and really get intentional about what we're doing here. But that's about gonna wrap it up. We have a lot of other other comments and stuff that we got from people that
keep those emails coming.
Well,
we appreciate it. Tim G,
yeah.
we got email from you. Reese B, thank you so much for the emails. But running out of time here on the show today.
It's hard to get to everything, especially when we've got great conversations going. So we're gonna start wrapping up here. We'll let Kristin go first here. Do you want to let us know, like, where can we find you? How can we help with your project? Tell the people what you need.
Sure. So you can find me at Walking Detroit on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And then my blog is walkingdetroit.blog. I use Tumblr right now because it's shareable, so it's fun to, spread the message. Other people can reblog my posts, and I would say just keep spreading the word about the city of Detroit. I'm doing a lot of photography, obviously, and sharing thoughts I have as I'm walking around, but yeah, I would say, just sharing is awesome, and contributing to the conversations.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. And we'll make sure we put that in the show notes and in the description on YouTube for people to check out. Ethan, where can we find you?
I said it again. You can find me at Climate and Transit on most social medias except Twitter, where you can find me at Climate Transit. And I just want to sneak this in here. Train good, car bad.
Nicely done. Nick, where can we find you?
I'm at Nick Laporte on YouTube and Nick the Door and other social media platforms.
Fantastic. And you can find me at Humane Cities on all the platforms where I happen to be. And you can also find me at Unsprawling in those same places if you're looking for some Calgary-specific news and urbanist content. And with that, we'll wrap up the show. Kristin, we'll give you the last word here. Although I think Nick has
start. Ethan, just double down. Let's do it again.
All right, let's double down.
Ethan, double
Trains
down.
are good, cars are bad.
Two wheels good.
Nick.
Feet
and Kristin.
Feet first.
Nice. That's probably the smoothest it's ever been. Great work.